I would like to welcome all those in attendance, and I call the Monday, November 14th, 2022, regular business meeting of the Lee County Board of Education to order. Dr. Miller will give tonight's invocation.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather and do business on behalf of the students and the staff and the community. I ask that you give us all wisdom to do what is right, to do what is best, to honor you, and to be good stewards of the resources entrusted to us. Bless this meeting and all those present, and help us part safely this evening. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You have tonight's agenda before you. If there are no modifications, we can adopt by consent. First thing we have is we've been requested to approve the October 17th, 2022 minutes for the regular business meeting. May I have a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, are there any corrections, questions, or further discussion from the board? Being none, it is moved and seconded the minutes be approved as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have been asked to approve the September 2022 financials that were presented for review in tonight's board package. May I have a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any questions?
Not really a question, but I guess I didn't realize they were 2 months behind. These are the September figures, and I didn't realize that we were 2 months out, and not having. I really do understand not having October. October would have been good, but I understand that we just can't, get everything together to be able to present it. And there's 2 weeks, and I understand.
Yeah.
I called Gary on it today.
The law states that y'all have to approve a financial statement at every meeting. And if we were 1 month behind, it would be months where y'all do 2, and there's months where you wouldn't do any, because like if the last business day of the month was on let's just say a Sunday, and the first Monday, and then the second Monday would be a meeting, and we wouldn't even have a bank statement. So that's why we can't consistently, and I asked a question at one of these workshops, about that situation to Corey Kirby, and he suggested to everybody in the room that we fall 2 months behind in the presentation because of the Senate Bill 68.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Being none, it has been moved and seconded that the September 2022 financials be approved as presented. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we would like to recognize the Lee County School System Teacher of the Year. Dr. Miller, would you like to introduce her?
Yes, ma'am. We have a very special guest with some special people here tonight, and so I'm going to call on her principal, Ms. Candace Smith.
So I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Little Ray of Sunshine. This is Libba Waldron, and she is our Teacher of the Year. She's a 4th grade teacher at our school and a Lee County graduate. Woo woo! So raising them up right. And then we have Zoe here. She's in kindergarten, and her husband Michael. So we are very proud, and she's just been a great asset to our 4th grade team and our school in general. So we love having her. We're so proud that she's ours.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, I believe, is our presentation by Kathy Wooten on PBIS. Dr. Miller.
Miss Kathy Wooten is a friend of the Lee County school system. She has retired from here and has done so much for our students and staff in this community. And now she is working as a school climate specialist with Southwest Georgia RESA. And we wanted her to come and be able to share a little bit about PBIS, positive behavior intervention and supports and what that is and what it means and why we're involved with it. So Miss Kathy is here to share with us. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. First helping me out here. Thank you, Jennifer. Just double check. Okay. So, just want to start by thanking for the invitation, thanking Dr. Miller, and just have a great working relationship with the Lee County Schools and appreciate the opportunity to continue to work here and visit schools and work with your fabulous school leaders and district leaders. And so we're going to talk tonight about PBIS as a framework. And so when I looked at your PBIS implementation plan, which Ms. Duke heads that up, and that was done over the summer in anticipation for this school year, these are some of the things that the implementation plan said. That Lee County leaders, meaning our school and district leaders, understand that appropriate social, emotional, and behavioral skills enhance and promote academic engagement and progress of all students. And so as I work with your district team and I go and do walkthroughs in your schools a couple of times a year, I work with your principals and assistant principals. We've done professional learning with them over the years, and I know all of them. I believe that to be true of all of your leaders, that they believe that social, emotional, behavioral skills are necessary and important, and that the number of students with social and emotional concerns is rising. So we're not just seeing that. I cover 15 school districts in Southwest Georgia and work as a coach with those districts. That's not just a problem here, it's a problem everywhere. You know, there are lots of contributing factors for that probably. I mean, we all talk about COVID and we talk about mental health. Social emotional is often linked to poverty and socioeconomic factors, trauma. So there's just a lot of things that go into that rise of concern with student social and emotional and behavioral functioning. Another concern, particularly when we think about our primary and elementary schools, is we're seeing the severity of the behaviors escalating at young ages. You know, a lot of times we didn't see that so much at the younger ages and as the kids got older. But we see a number increasing at those ages, and, you know, of concern that I know I've talked to those leaders about is even the students that seem to not have issues at the lower grade levels and seem to follow the rules and do well, something happens by middle school, right? I mean, there are a lot of factors at middle school, and so we start to see some escalation in those behaviors then. These last 2 points I added because I know them to be true. We have a lot more numbers of foster students, foster placement students in Lee County. That's everywhere. It's not just here, but with young ages, we see a large number of students, and with those students, we anticipate that they've experienced trauma, right, because of their situation and things that have happened beyond their control. And so when a person's experienced trauma, we know that social emotional concerns could certainly be on the increase. And then I know from having been here, been employed here, that free and reduced meal numbers are higher now than they were in the past. I mean, you know, when I came 100 years ago to Lee County in 1993, I believe our free and reduced numbers were 13%. I don't know what they are now, they're over 50%, right? So that's that socioeconomic factor that we talk about, you know, that is just a part of our overall functioning of the whole child. And so I just put a little research in here by Dr. Eric Jensen. He does a lot of work with trauma and looking at socioeconomic status, and he has tied in with a good deal of research that students that have experienced lower socioeconomic status, poverty, stressors in their life, trauma, will have more acting out, will be more impulsive, will be more impatient, that they won't have the social skills that we like students to have. You know, their behavioral responses are limited. They don't have a good range of how to handle situations, and they just don't have empathy for others. They're very, you know, egocentric in terms of their thoughts about social emotional skills. And so, you know, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know, but family dynamic continues to change. Like, you know, 20 years ago we thought, how much different could it be? Well, you know, now we have same-sex parents, and we have even more single parents, and we have lots of families that don't have a covenant relationship. I mean, you know, all parents either work or maybe they don't, and why don't they? We still have continued grandparents and great-grandparents who are raising children. We have young parents who, I talk to your leaders and your counselors, and they say, our parents need parenting. And so if I need parenting as a parent, it's hard for me to parent my own children and to set those limits. And then we talked already about student stressors. Those just continue to increase, and that value difference between home and school. If I have poor social skills in my home and we don't know how to solve conflict in our home, then I'm going to take those same lack of skills to school. And so I don't come with those skills that maybe we expected students to come with in the past. And I don't think I have to tell anyone here that soft skills in the workplace are a deficit. I mean, how many of you have been just to check out somewhere or to try to get assistance somewhere and you felt like, these people don't have the basic skills to even wait on me? One of my clerks at Walgreens has three months into the job, still has to have how to work the cash register, or I guess it's a computer now, on a notepad, which she holds in her hand while she does it. So you can imagine that me just picking up a prescription is a 30-minute proposition. And she doesn't know how to express that either, so we have that communication problem. I mean, soft skills are a real issue, and we can't get qualified people to work. And so the more we can graduate those students who have more of those skills, the better they're going to be equipped after school. And then, community violence is a big issue, and that's linked directly to social and behavioral functioning. So now that I've told y'all the doom and gloom and the reason why we need PBIS, I'll tell you a little bit about PBIS. PBIS is not a program, it's not an initiative, it's a framework. And so what we do is try to teach a framework of systems to schools that they then decide exactly what that looks like in their school. We give them some parameters, we try to guide them through organizational knowledge, but we don't tell them this is your priority, or, they decide what are their problems, how they're going to try to solve those problems, what that looks like within the framework. And so what we're doing is trying to create environments that improves the likelihood that students will do the right thing. So we want those environments to be predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. And that's what PBIS helps to do through that framework, is to impact positively environments where staff and students work and grow. And so we can't make students learn or behave. That's out of our parameters of what we are able to do, right? But we can create environments to increase the likelihood that students will learn and behave. And so if we do that, and we do that consistently and fairly in a curriculum framework, we increase the likelihood that the environment will be changed positively and will impact students positively. So I call this the refrigerator magnet, but this is what PBIS is in a nutshell. We want to impact outcomes. We want students to graduate from high school. We want them to have those behavioral skills that we hope will make them good citizens, right? And so we use data. We say opinion doesn't count. We want to know what your data says about your issues. What are you doing well? What are you not doing well? What needs to improve? Use data. And then we talk over on the left about systems. How do we put systems in place consistently in our building through looking at data to impact our practices? And practices are the things that adults do every day in the building. What can we do to support students through our practices so that the needs that we've identified can be met and we can move forward and make progress? It really is school improvement or school effectiveness in a nutshell. It's just always been targeted more towards social and behavioral needs. So a lot of people, my husband being one of them, says, why don't y'all just punish them more? I mean, good grief, they're not behaving, let's just punish them. We all wish it were that easy, right? I know that the educators in the room know that if we could punish it out of them, we would have already solved this problem, right? I mean, we've been punishing these same children for a long time, and punishment just doesn't really solve the problem. So if we look at traditional discipline, the discipline I grew up with, the discipline that a lot of us probably grew up with, we know that traditional discipline is reactive. A child misbehaves, and so then we react to that. And it focuses on what we want the child to not do. And it doesn't ever really teach the desired behavior. It just punishes the misbehavior, right? It can really damage relationships. And the more that we progress as educators, we know that The one thing we have in our pocket is trying to build relationships with students. Those students who have trauma, who don't come with the skills they need, that if we can build that trust and that relationship with that student, they're more likely to want to do what we ask them to do. So relationships are critical, and traditional discipline really damages those relationships. It can impede learning. It can lead to more student dropouts. It satisfies the person who, maybe the teacher or the administrator who felt some harm from the behavior, but it really rarely has lasting impact on the student that's punished. There are some exceptions to that. If a student comes through a loving home and they learn limits and they learn, what to do and what not to do, and they're taught that in their home, and then they just have a mess up at school, they have a misbehavior incident. Now sometimes punishment can really work, right? Because home and school work together, and the student realizes they messed up because they have a value system that matches the school. But a lot of our kids that we're talking about today don't have that same value system. There's a disconnect. A lot of times those parents don't even agree with us in how we're implementing discipline with their students. So discipline just becomes another area of conflict. Now, I'm not suggesting we're not going to punish kids. We're punishing kids, aren't we? Punishment happens every day, but traditional discipline just really focused only on punishment. That was pretty much what it was about. And so I looked at the belief statements for Lee County, and I looked at the mission statement. And so the fifth belief statement that Lee County says that you all believe in is prepare all students with the academic, social, and work skills necessary to be productive citizens in school and life. And so if we take just traditional discipline of punishment, that really is contrary to that belief. And then I know that we have to keep schools safe. I'm all about keeping schools safe. Dr. Miller and I were talking about that before this meeting started tonight. So I'm not saying that we're not going to impart traditional discipline in situations where we got to look at safety and aggression and those kinds of things. It's just that a lot of the acts that we have on a daily basis don't necessarily fit into that category. So we know that if a student has a single out-of-school suspension in 9th grade, there's a 50% increase that student will drop out, and an almost 20% decrease in enrollment in post-secondary education. And we know that even when we control for other risk factors, like deviant behavior, gang activity, etc., if a student receives an out-of-school suspension, it's a significant predictor of future antisocial behavior. And then when we're really trying to look at long-term outcomes, I don't think this would be a surprise, out-of-school suspension is more linked to negative outcomes than ISS. So the more restrictive and the more exclusionary the punishment is, the more negative outcomes for the student. And not just the student who's been punished, but really for the climate of the entire school. And so this brings us to what our framework looks like for PBIS. I told you it was a framework, and we have these 7 systems that we ask schools to implement. The first one's teaming and leadership. You have a district team, they have a school team, and they know their roles and responsibilities. We'll look at that in just a minute. They develop expectations for behavior, and after they develop what those expectations are, they teach them. Teaching expectations, teaching behavior is a key component of PBIS. We don't just say, students should already know that, they should come to our school knowing that. We assume that they don't know that, or they don't know it the way we want them to know it, and so we teach that regularly and systematically. And then we believe that feedback is one of the key components of efficacy in teaching. It's giving appropriate feedback to students. And so we want to give feedback to students who are doing the right thing, because most of the students in your school are doing the right thing. And so we want to give that acknowledgement and feedback to them, but we also want to give feedback for inappropriate behavior, so students get that through teaching, through that kind of feedback as well. I told you we base everything on data, and so we have a framework for how do we use data in our building to problem solve, form solutions, and see if those work. And then the last one is a system for evaluating fidelity. So in PBIS, there are a couple of surveys. One is a staff-wide survey, so they get feedback from the staff on how they're functioning. One is a team survey that the PBIS team does. But they use that and they judge themselves. We don't judge them, they judge themselves on those 2 surveys, and they decide what our next steps need to be based on those pieces. There is a part I'm involved in, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So there's some of the team roles and responsibilities, but they have flexibility in that as well. We suggest that as a beginning so that they're covering all the responsibilities and they're making it a true team effort as opposed to one person doing all the work. And then this is a quote from John Herner. He was the president of National Association of Special Education Directors, and he said this back in 1998, but it's just as good today as it was then. He said, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, sometimes we want to jump to punishment, right? That seems like what we want to say there. But really, why do we want to answer that last question differently than we answer the other questions? Because students need to be taught how to behave just as well as they need to be taught how to do academic work and other things in their lives. So the importance of teaching behavior is that students learn bad behaviors. It's not that it was just born innately in them. I mean, somehow they learn to misbehave, because either they weren't taught or it was modeled for them inappropriately or it got them attention. Through whatever process, they learn bad behaviors, and they can learn appropriate behaviors, right? And so if we only use aversive consequences, i.e. punishment, they don't learn better ways of behaving. And so we want to directly teach the expected behaviors, which we call replacement behaviors, under those expectations. And we want to give them specific feedback and opportunities to practice so that they can practice those replacement behaviors, be acknowledged for using those replacement behaviors, and hopefully move forward in improvement. Here's just an example of a matrix. A matrix is something that all of your school people are used to. And so over on the left column, you see that this particular example school has be respectful, be responsible, and be safe. Those are their expectations. And then in the white squares would be replacement behaviors. We've learned after COVID that sometimes we need to add mental health strategies in our matrix. Like we need to talk to students about what can you do when you feel anxious. We can add social strategies in our matrix. We can talk about it's good to say please and thank you, or it's good to greet people when you meet them in the hall by saying hello, or if it's a silent hall, to give a signal, raise your hand and say hi. So we can teach all kinds of things that we decide in our school are needed, and we try to base those on teacher response, what teachers think are needed, your data, why are students getting referred to the office, that kind of thing. And so it just gives us a framework. Some of your schools this year, because your district implemented Character Strong as a social emotional curriculum, some of them chose to take the expectations from Character Strong and implement them in their PBIS matrix so that they really aligned that social emotional curriculum as well as that PBIS expectations language into one. So your primary schools are using Be Kind, Be Strong, and Be Well. Am I right, Debbie? So that's their expectations on the left because they know that those lessons they're teaching through that social emotional curriculum will correspond to that and give them even more power. And so just like we teach a math concept, or just like we teach reading, or just like we teach writing, anything, we want teachers to not just tell students what to do, but have to model it, have students model it, practice it, and they practice it in the situations where it's needed. We need to work on hall behavior, we practice it in the hall. We need to work on cafeteria behavior, we talk about cafeteria behavior. Usually that teaching cycle for the expectations is just at the beginning of school. It's like setting our routines and procedures at the beginning of school and putting those in place. And then they start picking up their social emotional. And then they use their data to decide if we need to reteach any of these as the year goes through. So we're teaching behavior and we're responding behavior, just like academic behavior. It's the same process. And so when we're acknowledging students, that could be verbally, we're saying to them, good job. It could be very specific, where we're telling them exactly what we're doing. We encourage schools to have a ratio of 5 affirmations or 5 acknowledgments for every one corrected. And that's to keep the balance of the positive school climate. This really comes from research that started between married couples, that we really needed to not just tell each other what we want each other to do differently, or to correct each other, or to fuss at each other, but that we start finding things about each other that we're doing well and that we appreciate, right? And that strengthens the marriage relationship. And so that's what we encourage our teachers and our adults in our school to do as well. And then we talk about behavior-specific praise. The more specific we can give acknowledgement or feedback to students, the more likelihood that they will repeat that behavior by 80%, if they know exactly what it was that you liked that you pointed out to them. Sometimes we say good job, and good job is good. I mean, it's great, it's positive. Sometimes they don't know exactly what it is you want them to do, but if you tell them, I like the way you got out your book and turned to the right page and picked up your pencil, they're like, oh, okay. It increases the likelihood that they'll repeat that behavior. We also talk about, one of your principals told me one time that the best thing about PBIS is it helped teachers to know what kind of behaviors they should handle in the classroom and that they should manage, and what behaviors might need to come to the office because they're a major kind of behavior. So we talk about that. This is a slide that shows one school that had a lot of different referrals for disruption, all the way from a student being off task to a student who prohibited teaching and learning within the classroom. Well, that's a wide spread on what disruption is. So we encourage schools to define what those behaviors are and to decide, have teachers decide, what should I be able to manage, what should go to the office to be managed. Helps for consistency throughout the building among teachers. And so again, we're just trying to clearly define and teach expectations, clearly acknowledge, give feedback, and then respond to inappropriate behavior in an effective and teaching way. And this just talks about that the PBIS team's real impact is when they look at behaviors that are happening with many students in their building. The PBIS team's not sitting there talking about Johnny, who had 5 incidences of behavior last week. That's not their role. Their role is to say, in our school, what are the patterns of behavior we see for 10 or more children in the same kind of context? And then they can come up with solutions that will really impact what's going on in their school and do that more quickly. So when we're thinking about PBIS as opposed to traditional discipline, PBIS is proactive. It tries to prevent misbehavior. It focuses on expectations, which is what to do instead of what not to do. And we try to make those expectations clear and positive and consistent. It teaches the behaviors, and those help our kids towards social competence and self-management. It focuses on positive relationships. I mean, who doesn't like someone acknowledging that what they've done is they've done a good job, and that just enhances that relationship. It works toward keeping students in community at school as opposed to exclusionary discipline, which we have to do sometimes. I'm not saying we don't, but we want as much as possible not to. And the implementation of the training is supported, we're free, right? We come from RESA, we work with you, we have DOE support from Atlanta, and we have a technical assistant who works with us. We even have a national trainer at the University of South Florida. All that training and support is free. I went to one of the middle schools a couple of weeks ago and did some training on positive supports for teachers in the classroom. And I was just there all day, meeting with them in their planning period. So those are just resources that are available to you. And we work within a punitive system to try to continue to meet the needs of the school. It's not exclusionary of a punitive system. It's just trying to make sure that we do everything up front that we can do so that we can reduce the punitives as much as possible. So I wanted to say one more thing about the fidelity tools. I told you about the self-assessment survey. That's the first one. That's what the staff takes. And I told you about the tiered fidelity inventory. That's the one on the end that the team takes to decide where they're functioning. But I usually come through twice a year. Sometimes other people come with me, and we do a walkthrough. That's the second one. It's just a snapshot to help schools know what an outsider sees when they come in, and we have a framework for that. But we also look at what we call a product book. And a product book is really just those systems that I showed you, those 7 systems, putting them in writing, and they can be on the computer, it can be electronic, it can be a written system. but it helps them to be more efficient. We want them to develop their systems and then keep them going, right? Sustain it over time. And we want it to be as efficient as possible, because every year they're not reinventing all that. They're just saying, what did we do last year that worked? Let's do that again. What might need editing? And so if all that is organized and consistent and written down, it helps for PBIS to be sustained. And so one of the things we talk about a lot in PBIS is to do the smallest change that will produce the largest impact. We don't want schools to reinvent everything. We don't want them to start over and do a lot of work. We want them to say, oh my goodness, this month tardies are the worst thing in our building. What's the smallest thing we could do that would really impact that data and help kids to get to class on time, or whatever the issue might be. So I'm happy to entertain any questions, concerns, or thoughts, and I again appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Ms. Kathy, I don't know much about PBIS. That's one of the things I have requested, that we have somebody come in and explain it to us.
Right.
All I hear is the negatives. And I'm sitting here and
I'm hearing you go through this, and I can understand some parts of it, and the refrigerator magnet said PBS problem solving.
Right.
My question is it solving the problem? Or is it creating more of a problem? Because my idea of when a child goes into a classroom
Right.
to be taught,
Right.
the teacher's job is to teach a child whatever subject that teacher teaches, not to have to go through all these steps of PBIS on discipline. And I think it just takes away from what the teacher's responsibility is. You know, when I was in school, if you didn't do right, then there was a bit of fear, and you was sent to the principal's office and then to your parents. So I've been told, well, you know, it's not the way it is anymore. Discipline's a little bit different. But I just feel like what I'm hearing and seeing, you know, PBIS is not really working. You know, and have y'all done research to see if it actually is helping?
Well, I mean, certainly national research says positively. You know, your referrals have gone up, but my question to you is, what would your referrals be without PBIS? You know, might you have even more referrals than you have today? I personally feel that most teachers, and I don't have any research in Lee County to back this up, but most teachers see their role as teaching students what needs to be taught. And so if a student doesn't have appropriate social skills, they're not going to make the academic gains that we want them to make. And so if I have to help the student know to sit in his chair and follow classroom rules, and that's part of what I have to teach the student, and I have to do that through acknowledging and teaching and practice, then that's part of my responsibility. I don't think anymore we can think of students walking in the door and 100% of our students, or even 85% of our students, knowing exactly what we want them to do and doing it. That we have to teach a lot more things across the whole child spectrum in order to try to get those gains. You know, I mean, maybe, you know, your principals could add to some of this, but I'll give you an example from today because it's on my mind. I went to a high school, tardies were their number one. We went in last spring, and this was not in Lee County, and I guided them through coming up with a solution. They had a lot of tardies, and so they said, well, let's look at your data. So I pulled up their data, and we looked at 9th grade tardies, 10th grade tardies, 11th grade tardies, and 12th grade tardies. And they were just saying all these things they were doing, and it wasn't helping, and kids weren't getting to class on time, and teachers were having to reteach, and you know, it was just not effective. And so we came to the conclusion that we have a little competition. And so every Friday we would post how many students got to class on time in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th that week. And they posted it outside the lunchroom. And they said, okay, the classroom on Friday afternoon, the grade level that had the least tardies, gets a 15-minute break with their friends outside on the, you know, in the parking lot, and they can have their phones. And I'm just telling you what, those tardies went, and everybody wanted that 15-minute break. And everybody was working to do that. It didn't cost anything, it took some organization, but it was a positive way to help students take responsibility for their behavior, get kids into the classroom on time so teachers could start teaching on time. Most teachers resent when kids walk in late and they got to catch them up, right? So I think that certainly there are some extreme behaviors, right? PBIS Tier 1 is not going to meet the needs of 100% of your kids ever. They're going to be students who need more, and we talk about how we give interventions at Tier 2 and Tier 3, and they all know this, and they have that in place. But what we're trying to strive for is 85% of your students responding to the teaching expectations and acknowledgments so that we reduce the number of students who need more, and we have the resources we need to provide those extra things for those students who need more. So it's not a magic pill. It's not going to just, if we do PBIS fidelity, all this is going away. But I think it's one of the tools that helps teachers understand the process and helps them to know how to better meet students' needs. I don't know if that answers your question,
But we're rewarding the students for what they should have already been doing instead of consequences for not doing.
No, we're doing both. We're acknowledging students who are doing the right thing, right? And then the students who aren't, if they get to the point they need a consequence, they receive a consequence. We're not eliminating the consequences. The discipline cycle is one of the systems that's in the product book that the schools have decided on. How does a teacher decide when the student needs to go to the office? What do we recommend? Student goes automatically to the office for these things, fighting or, aggression or those kind of things, they go automatically. Sometimes a student goes to the office after they've had a repetitive minor problem, right? They've done this 3 times, maybe they go to the office, or the teacher says this is starting to interfere with my classroom, and then they go to the office. Your administrators are very supportive of trying to help teachers to teach, and they want that to happen. But we also don't need the office to be a revolving door where a lot of kids go for behaviors that they shouldn't. The teacher can acquire skills to learn how to manage. So it's a combination.
I got questions.
Yes.
A couple.
Yes.
So you said we need to teach them how to behave. I remember when I went to school, first week of school, you were taught to sit down,
Absolutely.
be quiet, raise your hand,
Absolutely.
do all the things, walk in the hall, single file.
Right.
So that's been happening
Yes.
as far as I can remember.
Yes.
So we're doing that part, right?
Yes, we are doing that
All
part.
right. So then is the goal to cut down on referrals, or is the goal of a systemic matter, or is it to cut down on OSS, which is what you opened up with? 50% of kids are going to end up out of school if they go to OSS. What's the actual goal of PBIS?
Well, I think the goal is for students to graduate from high school.
Okay.
I think that's the number one goal for all of us as educators, is for kids to graduate from high school. But we also would like them to have appropriate social skills so that they're ready not only academically for what the next step is, whether that's college or work or military, etc., but they have the social skills. We know some people who get a job, but they can't keep a job, right? And so because of mental health or because they don't have this appropriate social skills, they don't have communication skills, And so we want the whole child to graduate from high school and be able to achieve their next goals. And so that's part of what PBIS does. But your school teams and your school faculties decide what they're going to work on. I don't go in and say, okay, y'all need to work on X, Y, Z. They decide their expectations. They decide what it looks like to teach them. Some of them use videos. Some of them, kids do things to teach. They practice inappropriate and appropriate. They do a lot of different kinds of things. They also have to think about bus discipline. And so they're always saying, what can we do to teach kids about better behavior on the bus? Because some of their referrals come from the bus. There's just a lot, that teachers and administrators are dealing with. And this is just a tool. It's a way to structure it and to give them the systems to decide what they need and what it looks like. And I just try to coach and support them through that process. I don't tell them what those decisions are or what their goals are or what their targets are. They decide that.
So, I guess, there's always a place for negative reinforcement. I think in the animal world, which is what I'm familiar with,
Sure.
positive reinforcement is by far shown to be proven. I don't know how you positively reward somebody every day for not getting into a fist fight in a classroom, you know, or something like that, because I think the things that lead to OSS are isolated. I don't think it's group people just doing bad things that are going to lead you to OSS, and then half of them are going to drop out. But my concern is the kid that, so we tell everybody don't kick them out of school, keep them in the classroom as long as you can. And you got a student over here that this teacher or this teacher assistant has spent 30 minutes of her 45, whatever, classroom instruction time, trying to keep this one kid calm so he's not kicked out of class for a referral. I feel like we're failing every other kid in that classroom by doing that. Because now they're not getting taught anything, except they're watching a show of a teacher mess with a kid that thinks has some erratic behavior. So how are we really helping that one kid, or are we hurting the others in the classroom?
Well, I hope both. You know, I hope that we have a system. I was in one of your schools, and a teacher told me, this kid comes in my classroom every day and he won't take his hoodie off. And every day we have a disagreement about him taking his hoodie off. I said, okay, let's think of a way to get him to take his hoodie off before he comes in your class. Like, what can we proactively do to assist this kid in coming into school? Does he need to go meet with someone one-on-one to help him remember what the rules are before he has a classroom to pay attention to him? You know, but now this is a student that's not responding to tier 1, what we're doing with everybody. This is a student that's needing a lot more. And so he has a specific plan, but we can adjust that plan to meet his needs so that we're not having that repetitive behavior every day that a teacher's having to deal with. You know, and so the data and the problem solving piece is what I think helps us. How can we eliminate the problem instead of responding to that same problem over and over again? I mean, that's what PBIS helps, I think, to do. It's a process. It's a teaching component. You know, it takes time. But I do think it's a positive asset. And when I work with your administrators, I feel like they believe that too. And they see the whole picture. You know, they see those kids that you're saying are not getting what they need, and the kid, they're seeing it all. And they're having to balance that and come up with the best tools and the best formula to make their school run as efficiently and effectively, and to give students the best outcomes as possible. I mean, that's what we all want. Okay. Sure.
What are some common frustrations you see across the systems with implementing and monitoring PBIS?
I would say the number one is something y'all got rid of a long time ago, and that's we like school systems to use SWIS, which is School-Wide Information System. And the reason we like that is because it's a real effective tool in using data to problem solve. But I'll be honest with you, as soon as I walked out the door of Lee County, everybody said, okay, Kathy's gone, so SWIS is going away. So y'all haven't used SWIS in a long, long time. And so you're now moved to Spotlight, which is a component of Infinite Campus. My hope is that you'll be able to use that more effectively to really drill down in the data, find out exactly what the problem is. So I think, and the reason people didn't like SWIS is because it took double entry. Like we had to enter in Infinite Campus and we had to enter in SWIS. Nobody wanted to enter things twice. So now they just enter in Infinite Campus. Spotlight is a component of that. They don't have to enter twice. That's the number one. I've got a little pushback this year about the product book, and that's one reason I wanted to mention that to y'all. But I think sometimes that we get pushback on the product book because people aren't maybe maintaining it, or, you know, they wait till, oh, Kathy's coming tomorrow to do a walkthrough, let's get on the product book. Where if we had really been maintaining the systems and using it efficiently, I don't really think it should be a huge thing. I think it's something we need to have in place. You know, it's a point to help us to make sure we're implementing with fidelity. And if we're not going to implement fidelity, then why do it at all?
So basically
Yeah.
consistency and
Yeah.
application.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else?
Well, and I remember
Yes.
when we came to the school system.
Yes.
One of the things that was kind of a tool that was used was paddling.
Yes. Yeah.
And we paddled.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if they came to the office, it was one of the steps that they got on. And I couldn't help but think, for those that were in a fight, they were going to come to the office, and I was going to hit them.
Yeah.
You know?
Solve aggression with aggression. That always makes
And I
sense. Yeah.
thought, you know,
It made sense to me.
Well, it made sense to you because you probably didn't have a traumatic childhood.
Well, we got options too. It was 3 days detention or 3 licks, and the 3 licks hurt for about 20 minutes. 3 days hurt for 3 days. You know, so it was easy thing.
Because your parents were working with the school, right?
And I didn't expect you all right.
Well,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so some of the things that we implemented, you know, were to talk to the kids when they came.
Sure.
You went back through the behavior and you talked about things that they could do.
Right.
And so it was a communication thing.
Right.
And, you know, to be honest with you, I was really never very good, you know, at baseball or paddling. You know, I mean, no one really seemed to be affected, you know, to a point where I felt like it was beneficial. And so we started, you know, and we found alternate things. And that was just kind of one of the things that you were talking about a traditional, what we grew up with.
Yes.
And, I mean, there was a point where the teachers could paddle in several
Yes,
years.
I
gone
remember.
by.
Yes.
And they would get whole classes out in the hallway, paddle everybody. And there was a whole bunch of kids that didn't do anything, you know, but you got it anyway. And so, you know,
Great punishments.
so with the invention and the, you know, and us making decisions on PBIS, those kind of things changed. And we did what needs to come to the office, you know, what needs to, you know, kind of stay in the classroom.
Right.
And so, you know, but those are some of the changes that I kind of noticed that came about as a result of, you know, implementing PBIS.
Right. Right. We all learned a lot, haven't we? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda. You have it before you. Dr. Miller, would you like to discuss?
Yes, ma'am. The consent agenda is routine for this time of the year. We have 10 recommendations, 8 resignations, 2 corrections to a previous agenda, 1 reassignment, 2 under remuneration, 8 requests to raise funds, and 4 overnight or out-of-state field trips, and 1 website flyer. The remuneration is something, we don't normally see that on there, but it has to do with 2 employees where we asking the board to honor their contract, and that you have a letter explaining that. Glad to answer any questions the board has.
May I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda as presented?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
There is, Dr. Miller.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that we have discovered in our community is there is an increasing need to provide food and clothing to families. And I mean, we got statistics on how much the increase has been over the last couple of years. And so I just wanted to say how much our church, you know, appreciates schools collecting food, because it comes in and it goes right out. And, you know, I mean, we do a big push at Thanksgiving and another one at Christmas. And so I think the schools help families individually with Christmas and everything else. I mean, the schools do so much, but there is an extension, and it helps the food bank over at the Methodist Church. And, you know, I wanted to say that as a church, we greatly appreciate what the schools do.
And Mr. Rocky Wiggins comes and speaks to our leaders every year. And he's always well received and encouraging and thankful for the support. And it is a great need in our community that we have. So we're honored to be part of that.
Any more questions? It has been moved and seconded that the current consent agenda be approved as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next, we'll have our superintendent's reports from Dr. Miller.
We'll begin with our SPOS collections, and you can see on the display on the video boards that SPOS collections came in at $416,465.03, which is a record for the month of October for the highest total collections in the month of October since SPOS began. To date, we're averaging over $40,000 a month more in collections this year over last year, which was also a record-setting year. So that's really good news, and we're very thankful for that. Next, we'll talk about school food service. You can see the report there. In October, we served 87,397 meals. And I would like to commend our school food service team for their hard work and support of our students and staff. Last week, they were able to provide both breakfast and lunch on an unplanned early release day, and they really turned that around quickly, and the kids actually got a hot meal. A lot of times on early release day is a brown bag type meal, but they made it work, and our principals visited all the schools, and they were orchestrating that ballet of getting kids through the lines and getting them back to the classrooms. Many of our younger students are in the classroom. I would like to note that this Thursday is my favorite school lunch of the school year, and we'll be having turkey and dressing, and it's fantastic. So I hope the board, if you're available for lunch on Thursday, both KPS and Lee Primary, be good places to visit. And if you like turkey, it is a good day, and they work hard to prepare it, and it's always a lot of excitement for our teachers and staff because they enjoy it as well as the kids. So that's a good day. Student health services. I want to give an update even to what you have in your agenda. You can see that in our report that we had a decrease in the percentage of students who returned to class after visiting the school nurse. Normally we're over 90%, but this month it was only 89%. I believe this reflects an increase in flu, strep, and RSV among our students. Thankfully our numbers are low, but Ms. Shannon Weeks, the Director of Nursing, sent an email update to me today, and we have a 10% absent rate at pre-K. That's the highest of all our schools. All the others are under 10%, but we have seen the cold, flu, strep, we've seen more of that and not as much. At this time, there are 3 reported cases of flu and 1 of COVID. But Ms. Weeks let me know that a lot of times we don't find out about flu until the child has returned back to school. So it's not like in the COVID days when they were reporting those positive tests. This isn't reported that way, so we don't find out until after the fact. But thankful, I know some other schools in our area have been hit really hard, and we're thankful that we're doing pretty well so far. Finally, under plant operations, we have a very nice PowerPoint to review. Pull that up. You can see in their plant operations and maintenance report a picture of the baseball field at Lee County High School, and they did some leveling there and some other work. So that was looking really good. Appreciate the efforts there. Some alignment work as well. On the next page, you'll see a list of the projects that have been completed, including the addition of new air conditioning units at the Kentucky Primary School office and the Middle West kitchen. And I'll say that, at least I know at KPS, we ordered that several months ago, actually last school year, and it just came in. It's a big delay on those large rooftop type units. Next, we have some pictures of the new furniture at the Middle East Library, and if you have not been, you need to. It is awesome. I think they're enjoying that very much. It looks really good. It's very functional. It allows for group and individual work. It's just really, really proud of that. And the new primary project is progressing well. It's exciting. The board toured a few weeks ago, and there was no floor in the restrooms, and now they've got the floor and the flooring down, and they've put the toilets in, and even the partitions and the hand dryers. It's really coming along. And those new classrooms have been remodeled, and they look great. Ms. Devane and I were over there today having fun with the lights. They have dimming switches on them so that, say, a teacher was making a presentation or putting something on the video board, she can dim the lights without turning them off. It's going to be really nice. We're hoping that first phase will be wrapped up during Thanksgiving.
December 5th is supposed to be the switch over. Somewhere
December
around
5th. Yes, and that sounds like a long way off, but it's really not.
I was in there a couple of weeks ago. It's amazing how the classrooms have opened up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was that temporary hallway. They built a false wall in the hallway to shield the workers. That is gone. There's still some paint on the old floor, not new floor. And the men are working hard, and the teachers and students are doing a great job. Being flexible and patient. So we're excited for them. And that's all the reports.
Are there any questions? Being none, next up is the public participation portion of the meeting, in which we set a time aside for members of the public to speak with us. There were no such requests tonight. We have 2 discussion and action items. The first is a request for board approval to approve the proposed amended 2022-2023 calendar. Dr. Miller.
We're asking the board to amend the hourly employee section of the 22-23 calendar to include 2 extra days as compensated holidays, thus correcting the omission of having a weekday off before Christmas, and bring this current calendar more in line with what previous calendars had. Mr. Dallin did some research, and there were typically 7 to 9 of those days, and this calendar only had 5. So we are recommending that the board approve this amendment, and we'll bring it in line with what we've done in the past, and we'll take care of our non-certified, our hourly employees.
Is that due to Christmas and like I'm being on Sunday, or is that just?
Yeah, some of it was that. Holidays fall on different days every year, and some of it was that. Some of it was just, it's my bus. It was just, I just didn't put them in there, and I was going by the 23rd. That was in my head as a magic date of, they work until then or whatnot. And and to be honest, this has been approved since March or February or whatever, and somebody brought it to my attention just a few weeks ago, so I did a little study on it and said, yeah, it's a good point. So it's the right thing to do,
yes,
I think.
Right, and we feel like this is the right thing. It'll help them and bring it more into a line with what we've done in the past year.
Yeah.
May I have a motion to approve the amended 2022-2023 calendar as presented? May I have a second? Are there any further questions? Being none, it's been moved and seconded to approve the amended 2022-2023 calendar as presented. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Next, we have been requested to approve the sale of some surplus items. Dr. Miller.
We're asking the board's permission to sell or surplus 2 vehicles. So if you're interested in a 1985 wrecker that will not start, or a 2000 school bus with multiple oil leaks, this is pending board approval. This will be sold or surplus. I recommend.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the sale of the surplus wrecker and school bus as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Being none, it's been moved and seconded to approve the sale of surplus and miscellaneous items as presented. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Last, we have an executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you gotta read that.
To discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or an employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
There will be no new business taken up after executive session upon our return. It is motioned and seconded to adjourn to the executive session as stated. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We're adjourned.
Hey, Mr. Gary, y'all sell